Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Hey, did you guys have fun today? Listen, I've been to a few man camps, okay, in my lifetime. I was thinking about this today, and I'm not just saying this because this is the one that I'm at. But I was going, I don't know if I've had as much fun on a Saturday afternoon at a man camp as I did today. I mean, this is world class, and you guys are a ton of fun. I mean, I'll tell you, it's fun being in that. I was in that swing today with Brad, and who else was? Yes, man, that was, that was fun. I'm just glad I did it. My only regret today is I didn't make it to the go-karts in time. I got there on the last ride, and the guy, we tried everything we could to get him in them cars, but he was pretty firm on his boundaries, so he said no. You tell me, is that up? All right, well, then I'm going to wait. Okay, let me just jump into my message then. Well, let me review very quickly. The 4 points of the story are innocence, tragedy, contending, and resolution. In our last session, we talked about tragedy, and I talked a little bit about how the brain sees tragedy and what happens, and where in the brain that happens, and how we respond to that in terms of refusal and denial. Well, the part of the story I'm going to talk about tonight, okay, is contending. Contending. That's contending with a world that doesn't work for me and an inner life that seeks relief more than it seeks God. Did you hear that? And an inner life that seeks relief more than it seeks God. And as I've already mentioned, of all the story, you've got innocence, Genesis 1 and 2. You've got tragedy, right here, Genesis 3. You've got contending, and then you go to Revelation for resolution. So what's the biggest part of the story? It's the contending. It's the contending. And what did these people do with a world that no longer worked for them in light of the bad thing that happened in Genesis chapter 3? Most often, you see this in here. The Bible's unvarnished this way. It kind of tells the truth about people's lives. You see in here a lot of people trying to pour water into cisterns that don't hold water. You see a lot of people trying to create idols that will give them life that don't satisfy, trying to find ways to live apart from God in a world that doesn't work. Doing everything but, watch this, everything but the one thing that would give them life. And what's that one thing that would give them life? Is to be back here where they're made to live again, under the one who gives them life. I learned very early in life how to survive, and surviving is not the same thing as living. I want you to imagine yourself, or if you imagine somebody out, I'll pick the Bering Sea. Let's say that you could, I got Alaska in this story. Let's say that you could somehow stay alive for a while floating around out there, like where the cold didn't get you, okay? And you're out there staying afloat somehow, and you're able to live, and you've been out there for a long time, and you're getting really, really tired, okay? Tired. And off in the distance, you see this little orange thing floating towards you, okay? And you can't make it out. You finally can see it, and it's one of those life jackets that you wrap around your neck, okay? And as it gets closer, you smell it before you really see it because that thing's been out there a long time, okay? And it stinks. It's moldy. It's maggot infested. There's flies all over it. There's bugs in it. Honestly, it's gross. You smell it, and it's coming towards you, but it's the only thing within miles that's floating, and you know you're drowning. What will you do? Honestly, what will you do? Yeah, will you put it on immediately? No. Well, eventually you will, but the first thing, this thing is, it makes you want, like your gag reflex is going. Like the first thing you'll do is you'll see it and you'll get real hopeful because you think it's the answer. And then when you start to smell it and it gets a little closer and you see what's on it, then you're not sure. And I would say the first thing you're going to do is you're going to kind of probably reach out and kind of grab it and try to see if it can hold you up just by touching it. And then you're going to kind of go, oh God, this is really gross. But after a while, you're going to get used to it. Now, here's what I mean by getting used to it. I was raised in this family I mentioned this morning. My mom was 6 kids. My mom never made more than $6,000 in a year. We were really, really poor. I mean, on a lot of scales, we were poor. We qualified for every stinking government program that was offered at the time. My mom didn't take any of it. So we just got by with what we got by on. I remember our carpeting in our living room was so bad, most of the carpeting was the boards under the carpeting. And my job a lot of times was to vacuum that carpeting. And the big thing about vacuuming the carpeting in my living room was you had to move around all the places where there wasn't carpeting because that loose carpeting would wheel up inside the carpet or up inside the vacuum cleaner. So it was a real win if you like vacuumed. It's almost like moving around a golf course avoiding the traps. It was a real win if you got through all that and didn't wind up some thread up in the vacuum cleaner. Well, my mom also would have a lot of dogs in the house. We had dogs. And my mom never knew how to like put them down when they needed to get put down. So these dogs would hang around long after like their useful life expectancy. And that means we had dogs with diabetes. We had dogs that were blind. We had dogs. And you know, when dogs get that old and they can't take care of themselves and no one has the heart to put them down, that means they're pooping and peeing and doing all that kind of stuff in places they ought not be pooping and peeing. And so this house I grew up in, the carpet was old and it smelled like dog pee and dog poop, and it just was old, okay? And I never knew it. Here's what I do remember. I remember whenever I wanted to go somewhere nice in high school, I remember I'd always shower, and then I would not get dressed in the clothes I wanted to wear out somewhere until I knew I was getting ready to go out. Because if I had to sit down in a chair or do something else in that house, I knew I was going to be taking all that stuff with me on that date to wherever I was going. So I do remember that. But here's when I first realized how bad that house smelled. It was after I left for college my freshman year. And I played football at Yale. So when I left in August, I knew I wasn't coming home until Thanksgiving. Like I was just going to be gone for August, September, October, November, 4 months. So it was a long time. So I hadn't been home in all that time. I remember when I walked in the front door, okay, at Thanksgiving. Hadn't been home since August. I remember walking in and going, bam! Like, God, it smells like a kennel in here. I'd never noticed it. Because I lived in it, I got used to it. Does that make sense? I didn't notice it until I wasn't living there anymore. And the first thing I did the following summer when I got a summer job for schools, the first thing I did with the first money I earned, I bought my mom new carpeting for that living room. And then watched for the next couple of years as it got trashed and peed on and pooped on and ruined again. But we had at least like a couple months where it didn't stink. Well, at first you're going to put your hand out on this thing and it's going to stink and be gross and the maggots are going to crawl up your arm and you're going to go, oh God, this is bad. But after a while, you're going to be holding on to that thing long enough and I hate to say this, but you're going to get used to it. Like you're not even notice the smell anymore because it's going to get familiar. And that's all you're going to know. And after you get familiar with it, now the maggots are on you, the flies are flying, you don't even notice the smell anymore. There's going to be a time when you do kind of finally pick that thing up and say, I'm tired of kind of touching this thing. I'm just actually going to put it on. And you're going to put it around your neck. First time you put it around your neck, you're going to go, this kind of feels uncomfortable. But eventually when all that stuff starts crawling up and around your head and it all becomes normal, you're going to forget about it. That's going to be just life. And you're surviving out in the ocean, and you're going to strap that thing in, you're going to buckle it up, and you're going to thank God for that life jacket. And then maybe someone comes along in a lifeboat, you know, cruising along with a outboard motor on the back, you know, one of those little Zodiac type deals, kind of pulls up and offers to take you out of the water. And says to you, Jeff, you don't need that around your neck anymore. I know it's kept you afloat for 10 years laying out here in the water, but look, you can take that off and get in this boat with me, and there's more for you than this. Now, are you going to just let go of that life jacket? Now, honestly, are you going to like just rip it off? I can't wait. I've been waiting for this. And just rip it off and jump in the boat?
No, jump in the boat first.
Jump in the boat, then rip it off. Which, by the way, let me say this. That might happen. Some of you might rip it off when you see the boat. That might happen. But for some of us, here's what's going to happen. That life jacket has become such a friend to us. That life jacket has become such a lifesaver. That life jacket is what a hungry, drowning man reached for to stay afloat, that even when the answer comes along where we don't need it, it's kind of like, I better get in the boat before I take it off. And then even when someone says, I'm in the boat now, and the guy's saying, you can take it off, are you sure? Like, are you really sure? And so thank God that Jesus Christ who's in that lifeboat, you knew where this illustration was going. He's saying, you can take it off, Jeff. And I'm going, can I really? Yeah, you can. I go, well, sort of. So sometimes for some of us, that stuff comes off slowly. And God in his patience waits for us to slowly realize that we don't need that to survive anymore, that what he's given us will allow us to actually live. And ironically, even though that life jacket was sick, even though it stunk, even though it was gross, even though we stunk wearing it, for some of us, that's how we survived until we found the boat or the boat found us. I mentioned this morning that one of the things I reached out for to survive, and it sounds crazy to say this, but it was the fantasy world of pornography. because I was so hungry in my world for a place where someone was going to love me and not leave me. And my soul found an answer. Now, it was a sick answer. It stunk. Maggots crawled all over me. I started stinking with the life jacket. But for an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 17-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, it gave me a place to go when life didn't work. It was before I knew Christ. And then I had a couple years there in college when it's like it was on and it was off. And I was in the boat, but this thing was still on me. And I still had some maggots crawling through my hair. And God was gracious and patient and kind to say, I know. I learned how to survive. And a dying, drowning person will grab anything to survive. I remember when my dad left home, my family said about that tragedy. I asked you this morning, I said, would that be a big deal if you just didn't go home? And everybody in here said, that'd be a big deal. Listen, when my dad left my household on the night of Christmas Day, before my 4th birthday, when I was 3 years old, it was not a big deal in my house. Like, I think my older brothers and sisters cried a little bit that night, but pretty soon after that, my family began to say this. Here was the mantra in my house. Here was the way we survived that tragedy. We said this: we don't need Dad. We're better off without him. We don't need Dad. We're better off without him. We don't need Dad. We're better off without him. My dad was a philanderer. He was unfaithful. He was dishonest. And we're better off. We're better off that he didn't raise us. Now, let me ask you a question. Was I better off that my dad didn't raise me? I was not better off. An imperfect dad is always better than no dad. Now, unless my dad was physically beating me, abusing me, or harming me, listen, an imperfect, struggling dad is always better than no dad. So we told lies to ourselves to try to survive something that would have destroyed us. And I'm telling you, it was a destructive, destroying event in my life that I survived because I decided I didn't need my dad. When I met my wife when I was 22 years old. We got married when I was 23. For those first 3 years of our marriage, I remember her saying to me, Jeff, you never talk about your dad. And I said, that's because my dad is a non-factor in my life. I'd so conditioned myself to think that I was better off without him and that he wasn't a factor. And I said to her this: I was so young when my dad left, I really didn't hardly remember what it was like having him in the house. So I really don't know if I really missed out on anything by him not being around. Men, is that true? Not at all. But that was one of those life jackets that floated by, and I grabbed it and said, you know, the way I survive, the way I minimize my expectation and live in denial of my reality is to determine that somehow I'm better off not being raised by my father in my home. I remember when I was about 8 or 9 years old. How old are you in the first grade? Because I know I was in the first grade when this happened. Okay, so I was 6. So this is after my dad had left the second time. I remember my mom putting me to bed, and in our this little house we had, the attic was like 2 big rooms split in half by the stairs, and my mom and dad had put paneling up there and turned it into bedrooms. This was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house we lived in with them 6 kids. So they paneled the upstairs attic so that my brothers and I slept on one side of the attic, and 2 of my sisters slept on the other. My oldest sister slept in the one small bedroom downstairs, and my mom was in the other bedroom. So I'm up there in this bedroom with my 3 brothers, my older brothers, Jack and Jim. Well, I was the younger one, so they were already still up, but I was already in bed. So the way you went up in our attic, you went through a door, and then you went up the stairs, and then turned right into my side of the attic. I'd already gone to bed. My brothers and sisters were all downstairs. The oldest ones were still down in the living room. And by the way, remember, I'm 6 or 7. I'm in that age range there. And I hadn't really said a whole lot about my dad being gone. Remember, I was better off without him because that's what I was hearing. But I remember that particular night, and I didn't put this together probably until the last couple of years. But I remember that night my mom put me together, and I started throwing a fit. You got little kids, when I say the fit, you know what I'm talking about? I threw a fit. Like I remember kicking and screaming and pounding my legs on the bed and thumping my fists against the mattress, and I started screaming this: I hate being a Schulte. I don't want to be a Schulte. I hate this family. I hate this family. Just screaming my head off, kicking my feet. Now, if your kid's up there throwing a fit like that in bed, what's one of the parenting methods you might think you'd employ to kind of help that kid kind of settle down? What's that? Discipline. Or what else? What's the more passive way to deal with that? Earplugs. I'm going to ignore him, and he's going to burn out and fall asleep. And I remember, I don't know how long I was going, but I didn't burn out and I didn't fall asleep. But I knew that's what my mom was doing, and I didn't stop. And eventually, I heard that door, and she came up the stairs. And she didn't say a whole lot, but she came to the end of the bed.
And she took a little bag, and she threw a few of my things in that bag. And she told me I could get out of bed. And she marched me down the stairs. We came out that stairway, and right there at the bottom of the stairs was the front door. And she walked me. Some of my brothers and sisters were sitting in the living room. I saw them as I walked by. She walked me right by them, right out the front door, and it's dark out. It's nighttime, and I was standing on the front porch, and she had that little bag, and she handed it to me, and she said, Jeff, she got down on her knee. She looked right at me. She said, Jeff, you don't have to be a Schulte. And if you decide you want to be, you can always come back. And she went in the house, and the door closed. And I remember standing here on that step. And I remember looking up to my right, and my street kind of went up to the top. At the top was Burkhart, and that had a double yellow line up there, and the cars went 35 mile an hour to 45, and it was scary up Burkhart. And I remember thinking, I can't go there. And then I looked down the street, and our street kind of went into a circle and then kind of went out, but down in that circle is where the Shevitz family lived, and the Shevitz family dealt drugs. And I knew that we weren't allowed to play down in that circle, and that was a scary part of the neighborhood, so I knew I couldn't go that direction. So I'm thinking, if I go down there, I'm going to die. I'm 6 or 7. If I go up there, I'm going to die. Literally. A 6 or 7-year-old, he's not thinking that, but he's thinking that. Like, I'm going to go out there, and it's life or death. And this is limbic too, by the way. It's life or death. And I remember standing there, and I thought, I can't go up the street, I can't go down the street. And here's all I remember. I remember turning around and walking back in the house and going upstairs and going to bed. Now, in retrospect, here's what I think was going on. I'm going, what was going on inside that little... I think that's the first time through all that crap that was going on in my house that I finally said, this isn't right. Something is wrong here, and I don't like it. Where's my dad? And it's not better off that he's not here. That got me the front porch. So what did I learn in that moment about how to survive in that family? I learned that you suck it up, you tighten it up, and you don't tell the truth, and you don't make a big deal out of it, but you're just going to be okay. Because if you can just be okay, you can stay here. And I needed to stay here because if I can't go back in that house, I'm not going to live. And that's how I learned to survive. About the same time, because I knew it was first grade, I remember my first grade teacher was Miss Fry. And I remember the very first parent-teacher conference when my mom had gone to see Miss Fry. And my mom was sitting in this big brown chair in that living room. It was supposed to be, it was like, it was plastic, but like I thought it was leather, but it was this brown plastic chair, big, like had a recliner thing on it. And I just remember, because I stood like right here to the arm of that chair. My mom was sitting in the chair, and as I was about this tall, sitting at the arm. And I remember my mom telling me about the conference she'd had with Miss Fry. And she said, Jeff, and I remember the look on my mom's face, man, it was just this utter disappointment. And I remember she said this to me. She said, Jeff, I am so disappointed with you. Miss Fry said, where there's trouble, there's Jeff, and where there's Jeff, there's trouble. Now, again, a 6 or 7-year-old isn't saying all this, but I'm telling you, it's going on deep inside their heart and brain. My dad had already left me twice. Now, what needed to happen to make sure I still survived? Who did I need to make sure was going to be okay? Yeah, if my mom look, my dad's already gone. And you know what? It wasn't it's not about him. The child always says, what's wrong with me? So my dad's already gone. Now I'm thinking, if my mom leaves, I'm going to what? Die. This is limbic, PTSD. I'm telling you, I'm going to die. My mom better stay okay. My mom said, I am so disappointed. Well, if my mom was here today, she's alive still. She's 80-some years old. But this is still one of those stories that my mom, like, these stories that live on and infamy in your home. Every family has stories that get retold over and over. This is one of my mom's stories. And it's a true story. She went back at the next parent-teacher conference. And I'll never forget the meeting. I'm standing by that same chair at that same arm, and I can't wait to hear what my mom has to say about how I'm doing in school. And here's what my mom said to me. She looked at me and she said, Jeff, Miss Fry, she had a big old grin on her face. She said, Miss Fry said this. She said, I have never seen a greater transformation in a young man. She said, I wish I had 30 Jeff Schultes in my class. Now, what did I learn? Man, I learned how to survive. Now, some would say that's a positive survival technique, right? Well, listen, I went through grade school, high school, not so much in college. College tore me up, but even through seminary, and I did not get a B. And you know what almost every one of my teachers said? I'm telling you, almost every single one. When I graduated from seminary at Western Seminary, they were handing out awards. And I don't say this because it's good. I say this because it was part of the thing in me that was surviving. When they started handing out awards when I graduated from seminary, they finally asked me to stand on the stage and just stay there because they kept handing them to me. And here's what they were saying. I wish I had 30 Jeff Schultes in my class because I learned how to survive. One of the ways I was going to survive was I was going to make sure that those people in authority in my life knew that I was the one they wanted in that class. That's how I learned to survive. Now, it took me places, quote unquote, but it also almost killed me when I planted a church 15 years ago. Because the survival, what allows you to survive for a season, never lets you live. How did your family or your absence of a family train you to deal with tragedy, loss, and sorrow? You see, this kind of training usually isn't spoken, but it's always acted out. In my family, we were overcomers. My mom would always say, when God closes the door, he opens a window. And I remember thinking sometimes, man, I don't want the window. I want to stand here and be sad about the door. But we could never grieve a loss because we always had to find the positive, and so everything had to stay positive. We could never talk about loss. There are two kinds of tragedy. It's what happens to me or to you, abandoned or abused or whatever went on in your life when you knew life didn't work, or what you do with it. What you do with that tragedy, how you contend with that tragedy to survive and not live. And so we make decisions and commitments. One of my commitments was I determined that if it feels good, it must be bad. Another one I learned was that unbridled passion is wrong. Some of you who know me better know that I'm no different standing here than I am if I'm sitting at a table or if we're sitting in a car or if I'm just hanging out. Like I don't all of a sudden become someone different when I'm standing here. I'm passionate about things. I care about things. I get animated. I'm opinionated. I'm willing to throw my thoughts out there. That's always been true of me. So what's it been like for a guy like me that always thought that unbridled passion was wrong? In any situation I was in, up until recently, in the last 7 or 8 years, I'd walk into a situation, I'd just be in myself, but who myself wasn't a guy, and we're all kind of different temperaments and colors and personalities in here. Some guys are louder, bigger. Some guys are quieter, softer, gentler. We have all kind of different temperaments. My personality was always one that if I was in a room, I couldn't hide. I just couldn't hide. And it just always happened. Even when I'd try to hide in the room, be in a meeting or in a class or whatever, I tried to say, I'd make commitments like, man, I'm going to sit in this class and I'm not going to ask a question or say a thing. I'm just going to sit here and be one of these guys that nobody knows is in here. And it could never last because it's not who I am. But then I'd always walk out of situations like that and go, man, I'm too much, or that's too much, or I wish I was different because the way that I'm made is wrong. The way that I'm made is bad. Because to be unbridled in your passion, to be big about your commitments, to be large in your thinking is too much. To lay there in bed and say, something's wrong, I don't like it. Walk in, go to bed, don't say anything, pretend you like it. I want to show you a scene from a movie called The Kid. How many of you seen that movie with Bruce Willis? Okay, in this movie, okay, this guy grows up and he sees where he ends up in his life and he realizes that he's a loser. Like he doesn't like where he ended up. He doesn't like the life that he has. He's been a survival. He's survived but not lived. And so in this movie, he gets to go back and be a kid again, but he gets to go back and be a kid, but then be himself as a grown-up, walking with himself, the kid, through life to help him make some decisions differently that he thinks will change his life and the ultimate outcome of his life. That's the thesis of the movie. I want to show you this one clip. It's a fairly long clip, but it's worth it. And if that technology works back there, we'll get to watch it. Okay. Stop crying. See that? That's what happens. All of us in this room can be placed into one of two categories. We're either addicts. It's another word for idolaters. That's someone who's surviving any way apart from God. running, hiding, medicating, performing, or in recovery. That just means that you're being found by an R-E God. That means you're being redeemed, restored, renamed, and recreated. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are his workmanship, recreated in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we would walk in them." I said this morning that we come into this world imprinted, just like Adam, with the need to belong and the need to matter. To know that I matter not for what I do, but just for who I am. That my worth or my value is not based on anything I do, but just who I am. We get that in Genesis 1:26-28, where it says that God created us in his image. In the image of God, he created us. That God says we are of infinite value because he made us. Not because we've done anything or can do anything, but just because we are his in the pinnacle of his creation. And remember, Irenaeus said, man fully alive is God glorified. Us being who God made us to be brings God the greatest glory. I've got this Bible that I've had this Bible now for about 22 years, this particular Bible. Okay, I probably would have changed translations already, but this is the Bible that I just started putting my heart into about 22 years ago. Okay, and I've got stuff in here. There are pages that are falling out. 1 Corinthians is almost out. There's lots of notes in here. There's some pages I can hardly read. If you open it up, you'd see stuff all over this Bible. And a couple times I almost lost it. And so what I did about 20 years ago, a couple years into it, I thought I'd lost it a couple times. So I put a reward in the front of that Bible. Now, I've had to change this a few times. You can see I've even had to change addresses and switch where I lived and change reward amounts. Okay, but it just says whoever finds this Bible, right now if you found it and I lost it, I'd give you $100. Now I'm thinking I probably have to increase that because the $100 isn't worth what it was. But if I were to put this on eBay or Amazon or something like that, what do you think this 20-plus-year-old Bible, with the pages falling out, okay, what do you think this is probably worth if I tried to sell it on the open market? Probably not even postage. Like nobody would want this. But this Bible is of at least worth $100. And who decides what this is worth? I do. My kids have actually swiped it and found it and brought it back to claim the reward. Because they know, honest to goodness, I'm not just saying this. If my house was burning down and there's a couple things I want, like I can't replace this. Like I'm not one of these guys who just knows where everything is in the Bible, but like I can see stuff on these pages. And if I had to start over, in fact, I tried to start over about 10 years ago with another Bible. There was a better translation that had come out and a better study Bible that I wanted, and I tried it, and I just couldn't do it. And so I said, you know what, I'm old enough, I'm just going to probably die with this. And so I keep the reward and I keep it in there because if you found it, I want it back. And by the way, you may look at it and go, man, you know, it's not worth my time and effort to get it back to him, but it's worth $100 that I'll get it back to him. But the point here is that I'm the one that determines its value. In the open market, it's worth nothing. God says, in his opinion, because he's the one that made you and you belong to him, you're the one that's of great worth. Great worth, the greatest worth. And that great worth is not tied to anything you can do. In the open market, you're a mess and you're not worth anything. But in his economy, you're worth a lot, which is why he says you're valuable. But that value is not based on, again, what you do. The value is based upon who you are and that he made you. And God's the one that tells us this, but then who are the first ones? Again, a little bit of review. Who are the first ones that tell us what God says is true of us, that we're of this infinite value? Who tells us? Who's the first ones? Our parents. So a little kid comes into the world naked, and what can a little kid do? Like a baby. What can a baby do? Cry. Like cry. Like cry. Like I need something, want something. Like I need it now, want it now. What else? They can eat and poop. They can eat and poop and cry. And they're of infinite value. And listen, and that baby believes that they're the center of the universe and that you ought to be there to take care of them. And they expect that you will, which is why they cry out. By the way, you know what the focal length of a newborn baby is? Like how far they can see with their eyes as far as the development of a newborn baby. You know how far a baby can see? It's 12 to 18 inches, the exact length from breast to the mother's face. That baby was made to be able to focus the length of looking up at his or her mom and to see the person who their survival is dependent upon. To see the person who's going to say to them with a look and a stare and a kind word, in the context of them finding food, you belong to me and you matter, and with me you will live. And I will attend to your cry and I will meet your needs. And that child fully expects that that mom and then that dad will be the ones that would give them that. Now, we raise those kids and we try to teach them that they're not the center of the universe, they don't really matter that much, and that they don't get all their needs met. And then they come to know Christ, and then we try to tell them, well, no, you're worth all that. It's ironic. I'm not talking about raising spoiled kids, but I'm just saying they're of infinite value and their needs matter. And a child is not ashamed of the cry out. A child is not ashamed of the surrender. A child is not ashamed of the need. A child is not ashamed to say, if you don't care for me, I'm going to die. So here I am. Wow! Come on now. I need you now. And a baby, or go past baby, go to 2-year-old. 2-year-old can walk into the living room with you having all your friends over, and they can have a poopy diaper with stuff falling out, and it looked like some of it got wiped on their face because they were digging inside and did like that. And then they walk in the room and their hair's a mess, and they kind of look and they don't have anything on but that diaper, and it's kind of falling down and it's got that heavy load look to it, okay? And they walk in the middle of the room, and listen, what does that child expect? And what does that child believe? Yeah, help me now. What else though? Like, you're going to absolutely delight in me. Here I am, and I matter to you. And you're not going to judge me or condemn me for the mess that I am. Like, you absolutely think I'm the cutest thing that ever happened. And that child is not ashamed of believing that. That's how we come into the world, man. Fully prepared to find a God who believes that about us and sees us that way. And then we grow out of it because of Santa Claus. When our parents in a fallen world won't answer this question, we never say what's wrong with them. We always say what's wrong with me. I shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't need this. And so this child who comes into the world needing, longing, wanting, and desiring begins to despise his own neediness and realizes that the thing that's most wrong with him is his need. And so this man, this boy who becomes a man, becomes independent, self-sufficient, self-made survivalist. And we survive this way, but we don't live this way. Look, we survive this way, but it's not living because we're just surviving. We got life jackets wrapped around our neck and maggots crawling through our hair, and we're staying afloat, but we're not alive. Guys, what does God want for you? What's He want for you? To have life and life abundant. That's it. That's all He wants for you. In fact, Jesus Christ didn't come to the earth to die on the cross. Do you know what He came to do? He says, I came that you might have life and that it might be full. Like you won't have to survive anymore. Like I came so you would live. Like that bad thing that happened in Genesis 3, like I'm the answer to Genesis 3:15. You died in that day, and I came that you would live now. Now, I'm going to have to go to a cross and pay for some sin in order for that to happen. But my purpose wasn't just to die on a cross. It was for the joy set before Him that He endured the cross and despised the shame. His purpose in that was that you would be alive again. Because what happened in Genesis 3? You died, or your parents did, and you were born into that same death. And you were born with a bent to be a survivalist, to try to find life apart from God. And I was too. He wants to give us life. Listen, He doesn't want to give you a mission. Hold on a second. He doesn't want to give you a mission. Did you hear what I just said? Do you disagree with that or believe what I'm saying? I said he didn't come to put you on mission. He didn't come to use you. You're not some conduit that He just wants to flow through, like you're a vehicle, a means to an end. He didn't need you to arm His army. He didn't need more like you to get His work done. Y'all, He doesn't need us that way. He came to make us alive again. And an alive person, I'm telling you, you can't help yourself but be on mission because you're alive. Most of us, we come up with a plan. We're going to go be useful for God. Then we become purposeful about accomplishing that plan. And then our passion becomes making sure it gets done. Doesn't work that way. God made us to find passion in who we are and who He is and what and being alive and how He's given us life. And you know what happens? A man who's passionate about the right things will be purposeful around that passion, and he'll find himself accomplishing a plan. And then it won't be his plan, it'll be God's plan. And he'll be alive in it. He won't be driven in it. He won't have to make it happen. His worth won't be dependent upon accomplishing it because it's just going to be fruit, but not the goal. He came to make you alive, not to build an army. But His army is full of people who are alive, being who you're made to be, so then you can do what you were made to do in that order. So He wants to give you life. What's He want from you? If He wants to give you life, that's what He wants for you. What's He want from you? What's He want from you? Okay, fellowship, faith. What else? Okay, hold on. He wants, someone said fellowship, faith. What else? Love. What else? Worship. Praise. This is what He wants. You're saying, all you guys are saying, this is what He wants from you. Okay, what else? Surrender. He wants obedience. This is what God's wanting from you. Now, there's only one thing He wanted for you, that was life, but this is all that He wants from you. Okay, anything else? What's that? How would He want joy from you? That'd be something He want to give you. Okay, it's a good, but what He wants from you. Wants relationship, trust. What do you mean by that? Life. What do you mean He wants life from me? He wants your life, okay? Anything else? This is a lot. I'm just going to tell you, I'm tired. He wants a whole lot more from me than He wants for me, I'll tell you that. Like my ledger's getting pretty heavy. I'm just telling you, my ledger here is feeling pretty heavy. He wants all of us. And what's another way of saying He wants all of us? What would be the one part He wants? By the way, this is, yes, thank you. Heart, okay? He wants my heart. Now, the Bible talks a lot about heart, but what is the heart? Go back to what was lost in the garden. What was lost in the garden? Innocence was lost. As long as the man and woman knew they were in this place, they were okay. They lost the relationship because they didn't believe this. What's that? Well, they ended up not being fully connected. They were before this. I mean, they had everything going good. What was part of the lie? You don't what? Need God. The question when God came looking for Adam said, Adam, where are you? It was, where did you go in relationship to me? You used to need me. You used to depend upon me. You used to follow. Like I was giving you everything and you knew that you could live here. Adam, where did you go that you don't think you need me anymore? The issue of heart has to do with need. Now, what two groups of people in the New Testament that Jesus had the hardest time with? Like He had a hard time with these two groups of people, Pharisees and Sadducees. How would you summarize those two guys? They would be what? Religious people, okay? Religious people. Who else did He have a hard time with? Hey, He had a hard time with the disciples. Yeah, a few of them in particular. But I mean, people that He just said, man, you just can't get it. The rich. Now, here's a problem, okay? I'm just going to tell you right now. In terms of the general population, we would probably be pretty religious in this room. And in terms of the worldwide population, I don't care where you live, if you have more than one change of clothes, you know what you're going to eat tomorrow, and some of you even own a car. That means we're in the 0.01% of all the world's wealth, whether you believe that or not. But you are in the top. You are the 1% of the world. I don't care. We're in here. You spend $100 or something to come here this weekend. Like you know you're going to get fed. Like you got gas to get home. You got more than one pair of clothes. You're the wealthiest in the world. That means that we potentially are the two people that Jesus had the hardest time with. Those who had the resources to live without Him and those who were good enough to not need Him. You see, He had a hard time with the rich and the wealthy because this guy was good enough that he didn't know his need. And this guy had enough resources that he didn't feel his need. And so he said, you guys have so much, you're going to miss it. And that's why he was so hard on those two particular groups. Does God want you to love him? That was one of the things that was listed up here. Does God really want you to love him? Does he want you to love him? I say no. Hang with me, though, before you label me. Does he want you to obey him? I say no. Hold on. I'm going to say no. Does he want you to sacrifice anything for him? Someone said yes. I'm going to say no. And I want you to open your Bible to Luke 7. I think I got 10 minutes. Go to Luke 7. Go to Luke 7. Luke 7, verse 36. It's now one of the Pharisees was requesting Jesus to dine with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And behold, there was a woman in the city who was a sinner. Does anyone know what kind of sinner she was? Everyone in the city knew she was a sinner. What kind of sinner was she? What was her predominant sin? She was most likely a prostitute. And when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the house of the Pharisee, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. Now, back in that day, if you were an adulterer, a known adulterer, what was the penalty? Death. By how? And who carried out that penalty? What kind of men? The Pharisees. So here's what I want you to hear. This woman hears that Jesus is in the house of a Pharisee. She's a known adulterer in the community. That night, she chooses that she's going to walk into the house of her executioners. Here's my point. How desperate she had to have been. Now, this is a woman who'd been out there surviving and finally gets to the end of that survival and says, this isn't living. And she hears about Jesus, and what she hears about him is he's the kind of man. By the way, even the fact that he's a man is a pretty big deal, because how did this woman learn how to relate to men? Yeah, like they used her and she used them, and everyone got what they wanted. Like transactional, no relationship, no value, no care. And Jesus is a man. But she hears about this man, that he's the kind of man that actually loves people like her. And so desperate is she about the state of her survival that she's willing to walk into that house of the Pharisee to see this man she's heard about. Which means she knows that if Jesus is not who she heard he was, if Jesus is not who she was hoping that he was, that she was most likely not going to live through the night, and she was going to end up under a pile of rocks out in the backyard somewhere behind Simon's house. Do you hear that? So this woman walks into that house that daggone desperate. Like, if there's no hope in him, I have none left. If there's no answer in him, I have no answers. This is surviving, and I'm tired of it. And she walks into the house. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she begins to wet his feet with her tears and kept wiping them with the hair of her head and kissing his feet and anointing them with perfume. This woman throws herself at his feet, which by then, we know from the story, his feet were still dirty because they're not walking around in shoes like ours. They're walking around with sandals on dirt roads. So he walks in his house, his feet are dirty. This woman walks in there. She throws herself at his feet. Okay, she's pouring out this perfume. She's weeping, it says. So you can imagine there's snot running down her nose. There's mascara running on her face. She's using her hair to wipe his feet. So there's the dirt of his feet, the snot of her nose, the tears of her face, the perfume from the bottle. All that is mixing, and she's weeping, and she's sobbing, and she's looking up at him, and what's she wondering? What's she wondering in that moment? Like, this woman is down at his feet, and she is a mess. And what's she wondering? Yes. Like, what are you going to do with me? Desperate. Now, when the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, if this man, talking about Jesus, was a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who is touching him, that she is a sinner. And Jesus answered and said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he replied, say it, teacher. A certain moneylender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other owed 50. And when they were unable to repay, stop right there for a second. If you owed a debt you couldn't pay back then, what was the penalty? servitude prison. You went to debtor's prison. And by the way, when you're in debtor's prison, then how long were you there? Until somebody paid it for you because you couldn't pay it from prison. So you were stuck there until somebody benevolent came along and was willing to pay it. So did it matter how much either of these guys owed? Really? They're both going to prison. They both need someone else to pay it. And while they were both unable to repay because neither one could pay it, it says he graciously forgave them both. Which of them, therefore, will love him more, Jesus asked. And Simon answered and said, I suppose the one whom he forgave more. And Jesus said to him, you have judged correctly. And then turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, this is my favorite statement in the whole passage. It might be one of my favorite statements in all the Scripture. It says, turning toward the woman, he says to Simon. Now, here's the picture. There's no women in here, so I'm going to have to pick a guy, okay? But you're in the front. You picked the bad seat, okay? Watch this. So this woman's looking up at him through those tears, through that mess, through that snot and that mascara and that hair, and she's wondering. And it says he looks at the woman, and then he talks to Simon. What's he saying right now? He hadn't said a word yet. What's he saying by looking at her? You were right about me. Everything that brought you in this house tonight, you were right about me. And he looks at her. And while he's looking, and by the way, he sees her like he knows who she is. And then he starts talking to Simon. So he's talking over here to Simon. Do I need to pick somebody else, or are you okay? Okay. So he's looking at Simon. Yeah, he has no hair. Okay. And turning toward the woman, he says to Simon, he says, do you see this woman? Now, how powerful is that? He says, do you see this woman? Implied, you thought you saw her and I didn't. I see her, but you don't. So you saw with one kind of eyes, I see with a different kind of eyes. And so he's saying to the woman, listen, hon, I see you. And I haven't judged you the way he did. Do you see this woman? He's still talking to Simon. I entered your house and you gave me no water for my feet. But she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but she, since the time I came in, has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with perfume. For this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many. He's still talking to Simon. Look, let's just get this out in the open. Her sins, which are many. Like, you think I don't know. I know more than you because I'm the one that sees. I see more than you, Simon. You think she's got a dark past? You think she's got stuff in her life? You think there's things in her that are, Listen, I see all that. Her sins, which are many. I'm not going to minimize it. I'm not going to try to make it small. I'm going to call it what it is. Yeah, many. Her sins, which are many, have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins, now he's looking at her, he says, your sins have been forgiven. And those who were reclining at the table with him began to say to themselves, who is this man who even forgives sins? And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Now go in peace. Now I got a question. What do you think happened in that woman's life after that? By the way, I don't know if we know. Somebody might have some ideas, but I don't know if I know. But what do you think probably happened in her life after that? Well, she was alive. Do you think her life changed at all? Most likely. And like, if I'm that woman, I'm like, okay, now where are you going from here? Because like I'm going where you're going. Like you, tell me where you're going next, because I'm going to follow you. You got more of that? Like more of what I just got with you? I want more of that. Like tell me, right? That's what I'd be thinking. But in that moment, did that woman make any promises of obedience or life change? Did she say, I'm going to love you the rest of my life? Did she say, I'm going to change professions? Did she say, I'm going to obey you or sacrifice for you? Did she say any of that? Did she make any promises? What's the one thing that she brought to that house that night? It's the only thing she had, but it's what she brought. What was it? And it wasn't the perfume. What was it? Need. That's the point of the parable. He's been forgiven little, loves little. He's been forgiven much, loves much. She saw it. She saw her need. She saw what Simon didn't see. That's the point why Jesus says it to Simon. Look, the problem you have, you're both going to jail. You're both going to prison. The problem is you don't think you owe much. She knows she owes a ton, and that's why she's going to get something out of this. She brought her need. When she brought her need, that's all she brought. What did Jesus bring? What did he bring? He looked right at her. What am I bringing you right now? Yeah, that comes later. What's the first thing I'm bringing you? You got some questions. You're wondering. He brought himself. Like you were wondering, she was wondering, is he going to reject me? Is he going to treat me like these other guys? So Jesus brought his presence. Now, if you're with that woman now, okay, what are you feeling? In that moment, what are you feeling? Well, she came in with fear. Now what's she feeling? Because what just happened was absolutely what she was hoping for. Hope and unbelievable gratitude related. Like you really are who I was hoping and needing you to be. Now, you need to know that gratitude is the soil of where love comes from. And I'll demonstrate that from my own marriage. I've been married over 26 years. Listen, I love my wife more today than I did 26 years ago, but it doesn't mean I love her the same way I did 26 years ago. Like I still have moments, okay? But most days I'm not like, can't wait to see her. But there was a time when we were dating that I'd fall asleep on the phone talking to her. I just didn't want to hang up because I wanted to be with her every single minute of every single day. I love her more today than that, but not like that. You know why I love her more today than I did then? Because I've had 26 years of this woman forgiving me, staying with me, not leaving me, loving my children, forgiving me. I mean, I go on and on. This woman has traveled around the world with me. I have moved her. I have uprooted her. We have changed jobs. I've been fired from jobs. She stayed with me. I'm telling you, so much has gone on in our life. I am so grateful for that woman. She's more beautiful to me than she's ever been. And the love that I have for her is rooted in my gratitude for who she is in my life. Do you see that? Gratitude produces love. Do you know what love produces over time? The scripture says, if you love me, you will obey me. You see this? Even our obedience is a product of love. When I said, does God want you to love him? The reason I said no is because you can't. Because you can't even love him. You know why I know that? Because the scripture says you can't. It says you only love him because you what? Or because he what? First loved you. And how do you experience that love? Well, he is who he said he'd be in your life. So you can't love God. You can only respond to his love for you. You can't obey God. You can only obey him as a fruit of the love you have for him in response to who he is. And you know what obedience becomes over time? You'll see a little sacrifice growing. But watch this. Most of us, the way we relate to God, is we think we need to sacrifice more, obey more, and love more. And that's how we train each other, exhort each other, should each other, press each other, sharpen each other. Man, brother, you just need to love God more. You need to obey God more. You need to sacrifice for God more. And I'm saying, hooey to that. I've repented of that because all that produces in my life, ever did, is an exhausted Pharisee. Men, you got one currency. Isaiah says there's one currency you got that you can bring with God that's cashable. It's need. I'm telling you, my prayer in my own life, the way I do ministry now, it's all about helping me and helping others see who they are and see who God is in light of who they are. Because you know what happens? When you bring your need to God, you know what he does? He brings himself. He doesn't bring a religion. He doesn't bring a code of conduct. He doesn't bring a moral code. He doesn't bring demands about how you respond. He says, I love you and I forgive you and you're mine. And we say, really? And he says, really? And we go, you got to be kidding. Really? Yes, really. Like me? Yes. You're kidding. Yes. God, man, I love you. I'll go anywhere you want to go. I'll even sacrifice because I find life being with you. You see that? This does not work. Well, I take that back. It'll work for about 20 to 25 years. That's the shelf life of this. And then you'll wake up tired and wonder why it doesn't feel like a relationship. It just feels like a ton of work. And most men approach their Christian faith the way they approach their work. And it's work. And that's work. You don't see it in the scriptures. All this stuff is a fruit of this. You bring your need. That's why the Apostle Paul starts saying, I'm the chief of all sinners, because he wanted to see more how much he needed, because that produced presence, gratitude, love, obedience, and sacrifice. I want the band come up here, and we'll start to wrap this thing up. Listen to Psalm 51. Let me read Psalm 51 while those guys are coming up here, just so you guys will kind of believe me on some of this. He says, the sacrifices of God, the sacrifice, does he want sacrifice? No, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. God says, I will not despise. You see, all he's ever wanted is your heart. That's all he wants now. That's all he wants now. So I want these guys to lead us in a little bit of worship, and then I'm going to come up and give you some direction into some of your groups. What is so amazing about the love of God that we just sang about is it's so different than the kind of love I ever got from a parent or a coach or a teacher. Because with him, I don't have to earn it. I don't have to go get it. I don't have to do something to make him want me or be proud of me. That's what's so amazing about it. The truth is, I'm a mess. Like, where's that guy I called a mess earlier today? He was right down here. I said, man, you're a mess. Where is he? Where are you? Yeah, you're still there. Yeah. Hold on. Listen. You're a mess. But you are a beautiful mess. That is true. That's more true than just that you're a mess. And you're a mess, but you're a beautiful mess. And that's more true than just you're a mess. Like, you know what we just did when we sang? We started out with the wondrous love of God that we can't earn or deserve. God says that's like a pile of dirt crap in front of him. Like, he doesn't need all that. And the gratitude from that spilled into what? Worship. That came out of gratitude. We exalt you. Why? We're so grateful. Because the love you have for me is so unlike anything. You see me. Like, listen, man, you are a mess. But you're a beautiful mess. You're a mess, but you're a beautiful mess. And I want to follow a God like that. I want to go wherever he goes. I want to go wherever he'll take me. I want the life that he offers me. And I've spent too much of my life running and wrapping life jackets around my neck that keep me up but don't let me live. So here's what I want us to do when we turn out of here. Some of you guys, I think there are probably some of you guys, you've been pretty religious guys, like good Pharisee guys. And maybe you've never even just surrendered and said, God, I've never really brought to you my need. I just need you. Like, I surrender to you. You might be one of these good guys that do all the right things, but you don't even know Christ. The Holy Spirit doesn't live in you. And you've been hit by that, maybe even tonight, going, I don't know the God he's talking about. And this woman saw in Simon's house. If that's the case, when you go to your church time, man, I want to say, guys, just throw the alabaster vial on the ground and just say, God, that's me. It is me. And I'm a mess, but I know I'm a beautiful mess, and I'm bringing it. And I want you to bring that to your group time. The other thing I want you to do when you guys get together is I want you to talk about, just say, start out with, this is what I've done to run away from God and to run away from my need and to try to think I can get along and survive. These are the ways I've survived. And I don't want to survive anymore. I want to start living. But start with, this is how I've survived. And then we'll talk about wanting to live. Does that make sense? That's what I want you to talk about. So I'm going to dismiss you in prayer. Lord God, thank you for these brothers. And they are brothers, 99.99% the same as me.